Well, let's do just a very quick review from the fabulous interview you conducted regarding the Navy and the F-14, and that what was a common theme for that is that a Navy air wing is constructed with the same squadrons and the same mix of airplanes. So you start to build teamwork, and you have a central commander. The carrier air wing commander. There's
Yeah.
a carrier air wing staff. So it's an organized group. It's consistent. You're with the same guys. Your squadron evolves, it kind of as their evolves. And also for the Navy, you're on a set schedule. Like you have visibility out a year, 18 months, whatever, to when your next deployment is. So you can use a building block approach to work up and get prepared for that deployment. So that's kind of the Navy thing. The Air Force, and let me preface this with two things because you have such a wonderful audience. One, of course, we're talking circa late 1990s. So,
Mhm.
that may or may not apply now. The other thing is because of my unique perspective as an exchange pilot, I don't really get into the, I get asked all the time, haha, which was better. And the reality is, neither of them had it all figured out. Neither the Navy or the Air Force have everything all
Right.
figured out. And it's really what we're going to talk about are differences. So I hope that my Navy brethren don't think that I'm talking up the Air Force too much, or the Air Force thinks that I'm just a shill for the Navy. But there are
Yeah.
significant differences, and I'm happy to share those with your audience. So the Air Force, I deployed 3 or 4 times with when I was flying the Block 50 Viper, and deployment meant to an overseas base in Southwest Asia. So think Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, areas like that. Of all the deployments I did with the Air Force, only one was planned. We knew about one deployment to Saudi Arabia. We knew when we were going to have to depart, and we tentatively knew we were going to be gone for about 90 days, and we adhered to that schedule. The other deployments were very short notice. So in the Air Force, unlike the Navy, we had to kind of be ready to deploy at any time. In fact, in the Block 50 squadron I was in, now this is 1996, 7, 8, whatnot, we actually carried beepers, if you guys remember, like the doctors used to
Yeah. Yeah.
carry around. And if the beeper went off, our mission statement was that from the time that thing went off, we were 72 hours away from conducting war off of any 8,000-foot runway in the world.
Wow.
And we tested that theory several times. And so literally you had to be prepared and be of the mindset that beeper could go off. The flight schedule was canceled. We actually had to pre-pack bags. We had to keep pre-packed bags at home and ready to go. And we all did that. The squadron worked very, very well together on that. So instead of having this kind of stair step building block workup approach that the Navy did, the Air Force had to kind of practice everything all the time,
Right.
which was just, you always had to be ready to go. And we had a pretty broad mission statement in the Block 50, even including close air support at the time. I don't know if they still do that. It was kind of silly, to be honest, in my opinion. But as far as the suppression of enemy air defenses, that mission, strike missions, and our air-to-air capability, we didn't necessarily build up. We just practiced all of them all the time.
Mm.
So that was kind of the mindset of the Air Force. You were just always, knowing that you were 72 hours away from disappearing to the other side of the world. So that's kind of the mindset. And every other Air Force squadron was kind of geared the same way, all the tactical squadrons. So occasionally, we would have the opportunity and be invited to go to Red Flag at Nellis Air Force Base and explain kind of what this is, because a lot of people have heard the term. And it's a gathering of squadrons, and they used to run Red Flag and Green Flag. I don't believe Green Flag exists anymore. Could be
Oh, right.
wrong.
Okay.
Check with some of your other guests about that. Green Flag was strictly U.S.
To
assets
ground,
only.
wasn't it?
So it would strictly be. It really wasn't mission specific as much as it
Oh,
was.
okay.
It was solely U.S. assets. So,
Right.
and also I believe at Green Flag they also ran some missions at night. Now,
Mm.
I never participated in a Green Flag. They were very rare that they occurred. Red Flag was interesting in that we would generally have, they would invite international guests. There was one time we flew with a squadron of Chilean F-5s, which they had kind of a rough start, but then they got up. We kind of how to integrate them. great guys. They had a great attitude, very grateful to be there. And it's a huge honor for a country to get an invitation. This is the State Department uses this for the Chileans to get invited to come to a red flag, even though they weren't flying like, a new sophisticated airplane. They were flying F-5s, was a huge deal. They had reporters following them around. I mean, this was national news back home in Chile, and they were great guys. Once we got to know them, great guys. Loved flying with the Chileans. Flew with some of the Norwegian guys. Fun guys, not a lot of fun to fly with, but they were good guys, to kind of hang out with. So that was red flag. So red flag, what they do is invite various squadrons from across the Air Force and throw in a little international flavor. So you show up at red flag, you fly in, you get your range familiarization flight, and you might have an F-15 squadron from Langley. You could have one from Tyndall. You might not have one at all. Maybe you've got Strike Eagles. Maybe you don't. One of the red flags we went to, we had C-130s. And you've got, give or take, half a dozen squadrons out there. And at the time, the Block 50 was the Air Force's baby. So we had to have a Block 50 squadron literally at every single red flag. So in a typical Air Force pilot's career back in the day, if they were with a squadron, say 2 or 3 years, they were fortunate if they got to go to one red flag. I got to go to 3 because we were out there constantly, which made for some kind of comedic issues. But the difference now, so you get this group of squadrons together who've never, many of you, shoot, I never, we've never been out here with the Langley guys before. We've never been out here with, the guys from Georgia or wherever they were from. Thrown into this soup, and it's like, okay, now you're going to go run these strike missions. And the adversary squadron at Nellis would actually kind of coordinate this. They say, okay, 77th Fighter Squadron, you're the mission commander for the morning go. First Fighter Squadron, out of Langley or something, you guys are the mission commanders for the afternoon go. And it would be up to, everybody go kind of gather up in the planning room and come up with a plan. You've got this kind of ordnance, you've got this kind of time on target. Here's the adversary profile. And even though there was a mission commander, and I got to be a mission commander once, and that was a great experience, sort of. There's no central wing commander for this. So you've got this group of squadrons. Everybody's kind of got their own agenda, their own training objectives. And you go out there, and I'm used to the Navy way of doing business, where we would go to Fallon, there's a wing commander, he's going to debrief you, and there's going to be this central leadership. And so the first couple of red flags I did, and I was a wingman at the time, I was still fairly new in the jet. I'd only been in the squadron, I think, a month, maybe 2. And so I'm just hanging on, and I'm a wingman, and I'm like, this is complete disarray out here. So everybody forms up. You're out there on the east side of the range, you've got your push time and everybody, and I'm like, okay, there's kind of a plan, there kind of isn't. And you push, and then everybody just kind of goes off and does their own thing. We're out there doing the seed mission. The Eagles are tying up with the adversaries. If any of the adversaries get through, we would have to mess with them. The Block 40 guys are off dropping live. The Chileans are up in the northern corridor doing what the Chileans do. And it's complete chaos. And for a Navy guy who is accustomed to structure, it was maddening. I was angry the first couple of days I was at red flag. They're like, hey, Guido, are you not having a good time? I'm like, this is bullshit, man. It's everybody's just so. But what I learned about red flag and learned about the Air Force, that once it kind of sank into me what red flag was trying to do, there's not going to be any organization. The whole thing is a free-for-all, and tempers are short, adrenaline's high, and everything. And once the light bulb kind of came on to me that was the Air Force's goal, that I was like, okay, now I get what we're doing out here. And it became much more enjoyable. We got some good unit level training, but the frustration still for me was that there wasn't this central point of contact. And then go to red flag, my very first red flag. I remember the F-15s from Langley. Can't remember who else we had out there. It's a good mix of airplanes. In the second week of red flag, you work together a lot better than you did the first week, that's for sure. So now it's time for us to deploy to Saudi Arabia a couple months later. probably less than 90 days. And so we show up in Saudi Arabia, and I'm like, "Where's all the dudes from Red Flag?" And everybody's like, "Well, Guido, what are you talking about?" I said, "Wasn't like kind of the point of going to Red Flag for all of us to work together and get spun up to come over here to Saudi Arabia?" And they're like, "That has nothing to do with anything." So we had just gotten done, getting integrated and working with this Eagle Squadron from Langley and the other various squadrons that were at Red Flag. And now we show up in an actual deployment overseas, and none of those dudes are there. And now it's like it's starting over from scratch. And that was something that was frustrating for me as a naval aviator. And I think something that at the time that the Air Force did not do themselves any favors by not building that kind of wing cohesion that the Navy had. The Air Force understood the concept of wing cohesion, but they had not like mass produced it across all of the Air Combat Command. And that was one thing that I've always thought that the Navy did much better with the wing concept, having a consistent wing commander, wing leadership, and building that wing cohesion and teamwork. Because you go through the spring of learning to work with other guys, an actual, hostile situation, and now you've got to go through all of the same growing pains with, now we've got a different Eagle squadron. Now we've got now we've got dark gray Eagles with us. We didn't have dark gray Eagles, out there. What are their capabilities? How do they want to deploy? Then you've got the guys. No, we don't want to be there. We got to be here. And then also over in Saudi Arabia, you have the mix. And then you've got in the midst of all of this, where you're trying to figure out what everybody's, kind of fits in. Now we've got a French Mirage F-1 squadron that is complete pain in the ass. And dealing with them. What we did though, sometimes we would go over there and had the Brit Tornadoes, fabulous guys, complete pros, where they needed to be, on time, on target, flew a very good airplane. And the French were just, it's like, what is the point of this? So that was the big difference. So when you're thinking about Red Flag, the Air Force would just throw squadrons together into this mix, not without having any real central leadership. And the scenarios that the Air Force and the adversaries came up with, absolutely top shelf. I mean, the Air Force has fabulous adversary support at Nellis. They fly the airplanes very aggressively. They stack the training rules in their favor almost purposely, I think, to irritate us. Just, and you had you didn't really like the adversaries out there. You respected them, but you didn't really like them. So that was the big difference. When you were in the Navy, you'd go to Fallon, you got the wing commander, you kind of do this building block approach. You go to Nellis for Red Flag, and it's like you show up and it's like Monday morning. It's like, this is like day 7 of the war. And everybody's kind of going in every direction. Guys are missing time, time on target. The Block 50, we weren't always necessarily in the position we needed to be, or we'd try to give instructions to like the Norwegian F-16 guys. They were not listening. They were they were on their own program. We're like, hey, like I remember one time we had detected, it was in my flight. I was the flight lead, I believe. And we had detected, everybody pushes and starts to strike, and we detected a simulated SA-8 that was like on very close proximity to the strike route. So we call it out. That was our job. Hey, we're telling the strikers, lean north. And we're like, you can hear like, me and, on there. It's like, lean north, given the position of this. And they just were so excited to be over the U.S. desert where like, there's no rules, and they could just, go the speed of heat at 50 feet across the desert floor. That's all they cared about. That's what, that was their thing. You would have done that in a Navy air wing, and it's like you all would have been, running around in your khaki, standing the duty, after you had your face ripped off. But these guys just like, that's what they do. Okay, and off you go to the and as soon as you'd get back, you'd debrief, and it's like as soon as you got done debriefing, you walked up, you looked at the schedule on the door. Where's the planning meeting for the next strike you're flying in, and you just did that for 2 weeks, and then the Liberty out there is pretty. I mean, obviously being in Las Vegas, so the weekends were pretty big.
Were the U.S. Navy quite involved in Red Flag? Because I've heard like normally sometimes the EA-6Bs come in and stuff like that, or was it quite like U.S. Air Force centric?
It was, well, I mean, yeah, definitely U.S. Air Force centric, but yeah. So you mentioned the Prowlers, the EA-6Bs.
Mm.
I think it was the third time I'd been at Red Flag because I was a mission commander, and we had, and it was an interesting thing. So it was the Prowler squadron from my Navy Air Wing. So the EA-6 squadron gets invited to Red Flag. Because the Air Force didn't have EF-111s at this point. So they had invited this Navy Prowler squadron. And here's this Navy O-6 who is my former wing commander. And they're like, he's not in charge. He's used to being in charge of his whole air wing. And he's just a dude. I mean, I know you call him sir and everything, but I mean, he's just jumping in there and flying missions. And I'm like, holy cow! I'm like, CAG, and he's like, hey, Guido, what's going on? How are you doing? And he goes, I'm flying on this mission in the afternoon. And I said, sir, I'm the mission commander for that. He's like, oh, great. I can't wait. It's gonna be, and he's very encouraging. He was a super guy. So we go, and it was the mission was, I was so excited that I got picked. It's just random. It was just like, hey, Guido, you got Thursday afternoon. We were going to be up focused on the northern part of the Nellis Range. There was a C-130 that was going to bring in PJs, the pararescue guys, to get him out. Like they were, they were going to deploy the pararescue guys, and it was my job to develop a plan to come in and kill all the adversaries. Establish air superiority, suppress any surface air missile systems. So I come up with this plan, fairly straightforward. And I am livid in the debrief, and I committed the cardinal sin of Red Flag. Because you're up on this big stage, you're in what's like a movie theater. It's like an auditorium with this giant screen behind you, and it's showing here's the adversaries, here's the good guys. Before you go in there, if you took an air to air, to go and validate your tape with the adversaries, and very thorough, very professional and detailed. And I'm looking, and I'm like, the whole time I'm out there, I'm like, I never heard from the C-130 guys. I thought, well, maybe they're just being super sneaky and not talking on the radio. And so we're replaying this mission, and like we're over here having World War III on the west end of the Nellis Range, us and the Eagle guys and the Prowlers out there. And then you look over on the east end, and here comes this goofy C-130, like 30 minutes late, trucking across the thing. And I literally turned around. I'm on stage. I'm mic'd up. Everything, my carrier air wing commander, everybody from the mission is sitting there, the controllers are sitting there, and I turn and go, what the is this? And you never ever cuss on stage at Nellis. You could already, and
really?
All the Navy guys from the Prowler are laughing hilariously, and every Air Force guy is, we cannot believe he said the F word on stage. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me with this. And I chewed those guys out on the stage, and the guys in my squad, they're kind of like, oh, we can't believe you're embarrassing us, but they're kind of like, go get them. These guys, they really gooned it up. So I kind of distinguished myself. It just so happened my former carrier air wing commander was in the audience, and there were a lot of funny things that came out of Red Flag. So I think it was my second Red Flag. We got a brand new intel officer. Young guy, second lieutenant, good guy, but very kind of soft spoken and not really much sense of humor. Like he fit in with us, okay. He was one of us, but just I don't know, just kind of real dry, real kind of stoic. And he had to get up and give the intel brief, and there would be a word, a letter, and a number of the day. And it was kind of a competition amongst the intel guys. They would come up with like some funny saying or something to help us remember this, because they said, whatever you do, don't write this down. You had to memorize it because, if you got shot down, we don't want to be passing these code words out. So our intel guy gets up there, does his, and this is the daily brief, and he's all very professional. And we're like, nice job. And he goes, the word, letter, and number of the day are Chevy L2, and the way you remember that is Chevy L2. And he puts the pointer down, walks away, and we're just like, ugh, that's our guy up there. So it came time to give him a call sign, and he was promptly named Chevy for for the
That's
way you
amazing.
remember that is Chevy L2, and we're all just
Yeah.
everybody in our squadron's like, oh, I can't believe this guy. So there's fun things like that that come out of it. Man, I'm trying to think if I'm allowed to tell this story. So as you know, the Nellis Range surrounds and butts up against Area
Mhm.
51,
Yeah.
Groom Lake, the dry lake bed out there. And so at the time, the most secure, sensitive airspace in the continental United States. And we were told, in no uncertain circumstances, that if you fly in there, if you even so much as they catch you dragging a wingtip through the corner of that airspace, because you could cut the corner to get back to Nellis
Mhm.
if you were low on gas, which you weren't supposed to do. And they said, if we even catch you, you're going home. You're going to get
Oh
sent
wow.
home.
Great.
So the F-15 squadron we had was from Langley Air Force Base, and it was my first or second mission at Red Flag. I was a wingman my first ever time out there, and their weapons officer, who had just completed 6 months at the weapons school at Nellis Air Force Base. So he goes to weapons school. I'm sure he's a top-notch guy. Goes back to Langley, and then his squadron at Langley gets invited to come back out to Nellis to support Red Flag, and he's their flight lead for the day or for this particular mission. For reasons known only to him and God, on his way back, he cuts the corner and flies through the northeast corner of Area 51. Lands, they meet him. Hey, here's what happened. And I wasn't around for any of this, but there should have been 4 Eagle guys in the debrief, and there were only 3. And he wasn't
Mhm.
there, and he got pack your stuff, and they sent him home. Now, they did tell us, Mike, and they said, look, it's a runway, and it's a lot closer than Nellis Air Force Base. If you have an emergency, a land as soon as possible emergency, here's the frequency that, you talk to the tower there. The tower was manned and monitored while we were doing red flag training. And if you've got an emergency, go in there. Nothing bad's going to happen to you. Land the airplane, save yourself, save the aircraft. Just be cooperative, do as you're told, and it'd be no big deal. So we had a gentleman, Notch, who had an oil, I think it was an oil pressure issue. So he declares an emergency and goes and lands inside Area 51. And our squadron commander at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Cook, had actually done some work out there way back in the day. So he kind of knew what the procedures and everything were. And I don't know. We got through the debrief. We get back to the ready room. Hey, Colonel Cook, so and so's on the phone for you. And Cookie's like, all right, I'll come get him. So we jump in a staff car. We borrow like some kind of staff car and fly up to or didn't fly. We drove. It's not terribly far. Indian Springs, which is northwest of Las Vegas, and there's an airstrip up there. The Thunderbirds actually practice up there because the Thunderbirds are based at Nellis, and they would go up to Indian Springs and practice. And so we go up there, and we're just kind of hanging out in this King Air lands. Notch comes walking out, and Cookie's giving him a hard time, and all this stuff. And I'm just kind of taking all in. We get back to Nellis, and Notch goes, it wasn't that big a deal. He goes, I land, I taxi. They give me, where to taxi to, where to park, which direction they wanted the airplane parked. I get out of the airplane. I'm by security. They gave me something to eat. I'm kind of kept in this room, and then
Wow.
I get loaded up, and so I asked Cookie. Well, what happens to the airplane? He goes, it'll be all right. Everything with Cookie, it'll be all right. So the next morning or next day, I guess it was, um, the airplane shows up, and there's a guy flying our airplane in a flight
Huh?
suit, no patches. He's just nothing.
No patch, right?
Taxis the airplane's back, and it's good as new. I never did. We were never invited. Navy squadrons, particularly when I was flying the Tomcat, were very busy. It would have been hard to fit a red flag in. You could have done it, maybe.
Okay.
That would have been tough. If they went before I was in the airplane, then it would have been strictly air to air. Probably would have gone out there like in place of an Eagle squadron. Like if the Air Force didn't have an Eagle squadron, maybe they would invite a Navy F-14 squadron out. But after that, the whole time I was flying the Tomcat, and even while I was in the Viper, I don't recall hearing of any Tomcat squadrons having attended there. But I did talk to guys that before my time, so this would have been late '80s kind of thing, that they would have been invited to Red Flag, and they would have just been air to air. Oh, absolutely, yeah. The F-16, particularly the Block 50 with the huge thrust to weight ratio, was a fabulous airplane, air to air. And in the visual arena, just absolutely would curb stomp other airplanes, particularly in two circle flow. Anytime that you were trying to pull nose to tail, that was where it was a fight that was going to be determined by who had the best instantaneous and sustained turn rate. The F-16 was the absolute gorilla at the time. I mean, now this is obviously pre F-22, pre F-35, but yeah, and against a Mirage, let's talk kind of Mirage 2000. I did fight several Mirage 2000s in the Tomcat when we were in the United Arab Emirates, and flying against that airplane, my recollection of it, and some of what the training we did with them when they were in Saudi Arabia, the Mirage 2000 guys were a little bit different brand than the F1 guys. They tended to want to cap and do their intercepts from high to low. Their goal was to show up super fast. I mean, seeing them at the merge supersonic was very common because of that big delta wing they have. The airplane's, it's a very fast airplane, and it really only had about one good turn. And it would show up at the merge. They'd show up super fast, plug the afterburner in, put on their kind of one big turn. If they were in a position to take a shot, great. If not, then it was kind of, they were slow, high angle of attack with that big delta wing, bleeding energy, and you could kind of have your way with them. So, they were really kind of focused on beyond visual range. They were very reliant on jamming, electronic countermeasures. The pods they carried were very sophisticated. They liked to use those, and their whole thing was show up at the merge super fast, one big turn, take a shot of opportunity, and then use their speed to get away. That was kind of the Mirage 2000 game plan that I remember.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Well, thank you very much, mate. And let's keep in contact. And I'm sure I'll get you back on the show soon.
Great. All my best to you and to your fabulous audience. Thank you for their interest, and thank you for continuing to keep the stories in the community alive, Mike. Have a great week.
You too, mate. Cheers.